The rich kids pranked the janitor's son, not knowing his dad was the founder's secret heir. What happened next shocked them. The air in the Novatech Industries boardroom hung heavy, thick with an almost tangible anticipation, a low, avaricious hum that vibrated beneath the polished mahogany, mirroring the barely contained glee on the faces of those assembled. Sunlight, typically a harbinger of warmth and welcome, seemed instead to starkly illuminate the myriad dust motes dancing in the opulent space, each tiny particle a silent, ephemeral witness to the profound drama poised to unfold. At the formidable head of the vast table, Mr. Alastair Finch, the corporation's long-standing legal counsel, maintained a facade of unwavering solemn professionalism. Yet, beneath the practiced calm, a fleeting flicker of something unreadable, perhaps a prescient awareness, danced in his eyes as they meticulously surveyed the gathered executives and the Thorne family members, each an eager participant in this meticulously planned tableau. Blaine Thorne Sterling, a man whose custom-tailored suit seemed less a garment and more a second skin poured onto his entitled frame, reclined in his chair with an almost insolent ease, a self-satisfied smirk playing languidly on his lips. Beside him, his sister Serafina, her perfectly manicured hand absently, almost rhythmically, stroking the lustrous pearls of her necklace, mirrored his expression with a similar, confident expectation. They were the golden grandchildren, the undisputed scions, the chosen ones, or so their every gesture, every sidelong glance, loudly proclaimed. Each look they cast around the room was not merely dismissive, but laced with a condescending pity, a silent lament for those poor, lesser souls who would undoubtedly receive less, or, more deliciously, nothing at all. They had spent weeks, perhaps months, indeed, what felt like years, meticulously envisioning this precise moment, the formal transfer of power, the unassailable confirmation of their rightful inheritance of Alastair Thorne's multi-billion-dollar empire. The very air around them seemed to shimmer with their entitlement, their certainty of triumph. Near the back, almost entirely unnoticed, an elderly janitor moved with a meticulous, almost ritualistic rhythm, diligently wiping down a seldom-used trophy cabinet. His movements were slow, deliberate, each swipe of his cloth a quiet testament to a lifetime of methodical labor. His name, as everyone knew him, was Silas. His stooped posture, the faded blue of his worn overalls, and the wisps of thinning white hair peeking out from beneath his cap made him seem utterly insignificant, a mere background fixture in the grand corporate theater. He hummed a tuneless, almost inaudible melody beneath his breath, a sound easily swallowed and drowned out by the rustle of important papers and the low murmurs of speculative conversation that permeated the room. Yet, beneath that unassuming, humble exterior, a pair of sharp, intensely intelligent eyes missed nothing. They observed the preening arrogance of Blaine and Serafina, the nervous shifting of lesser executives, their hopes and anxieties laid bare, and the lawyer's carefully constructed neutral expression, a masterpiece of professional poker face. A faint, knowing smile, barely a tremor on his lips, touched the janitor's face. He paused his cleaning, his gaze, now no longer feigned, fixed directly on the Thorne Sterling siblings. "The game, it seems," he murmured, his voice a low, almost imperceptible rasp, barely audible above the room's hushed hum, "is finally over." Blaine, whose attention was momentarily drawn by the old man's unusual stillness, scoffed, a short, sharp sound of disdain. "Still dreaming of winning the lottery, old man," he sneered, his voice loud enough for a few scattered chuckles to ripple through the room. Serafina merely rolled her eyes, a gesture of profound dismissal, as one might casually swat away a particularly bothersome fly. They truly saw nothing beyond the mop and bucket, nothing beyond the dust he cleared. They had no idea that the humble Silas was, in fact, Cyrus Blackwood, the true heir, the architect of their impending downfall, the man about to shatter their carefully constructed world. They had no conception that the game, far from being over for him, had indeed been played, and they, quite spectacularly, had lost. The irony, to Cyrus, was not just delicious, it was exquisitely satisfying. To truly grasp the meticulous, intricate games Cyrus Blackwood had orchestrated, one had to delve deep into the shadowed, often morally ambiguous past of Novatech Industries and, more critically, into the enigmatic character of its founder, Alastair Thorne. Alastair Thorne was a titan, a singular visionary whose boundless genius had painstakingly forged Novatech from a humble garage startup into a sprawling, global technology behemoth, an empire of innovation and influence. Yet, beneath the carefully cultivated public persona of the benevolent industrialist, a facade designed for the masses, Alastair harbored deep, gnawing regrets and a profound, almost visceral distrust of the very family he had inadvertently, through a series of choices, created. His official life was a meticulously crafted narrative of unparalleled success and philanthropic generosity, a story told in headlines and public accolades. But his private life, held close and guarded fiercely, held a secret. A son named Cyrus, born decades ago from a clandestine affair, a son Alastair had deliberately, with great foresight, kept hidden from the predatory, avaricious grasp of his more legitimate relatives. Cyrus Blackwood had grown up far from the gilded cages of inherited wealth, nurtured instead by his mother in quiet anonymity, a life of profound simplicity yet rich in principle. He knew of his father, the legendary Alastair, but their relationship was a carefully guarded secret, a bond forged not in public displays of affection or inherited titles, but in hushed, profound conversations. They spoke of integrity, not just as a concept, but as the bedrock of a meaningful life, discussing the true, often corrupting, cost of unchecked power, and the insidious influence of unearned wealth. Alastair, in his twilight years, had grown increasingly disillusioned with his official heirs, their superficiality and lack of substance becoming glaringly apparent. His grandchildren, Blaine and Seraphina Thorne Sterling, were glaring prime examples of everything he despised, arrogant beyond measure, entitled to a degree that bordered on the absurd, and utterly devoid of genuine character, their moral compasses seemingly non-existent. They viewed Novatech not as a legacy of groundbreaking innovation, not as a responsibility to its thousands of dedicated employees, but as a personal piggy bank, a birthright to be squandered on fleeting whims and self-indulgent pleasures. Alastair had confided in Cyrus, expressing his despair over their lack of vision, their inability to see beyond their own immediate gratification. He described Blaine's reckless spending, Seraphina's disdain for anyone not of their class, their utter indifference to the people who made Novatech run. Alastair, foreseeing his own end with a clarity that bordered on prescience, had drafted a will as complex and cunning as his own brilliant mind. He had designated Cyrus as his true, secret heir, not out of blind favoritism or a sudden whim, but because Cyrus embodied the very values Alastair felt were absolutely essential for Novatech's continued future, for its soul. However, Alastair also knew with chilling certainty that simply handing over the reins to Cyrus would be insufficient, perhaps even catastrophic. His other relatives, particularly Blaine and Seraphina, would undoubtedly challenge any unexpected heir, resorting to protracted legal battles, venomous public smear campaigns, and whatever underhanded tactics they could conjure. More importantly, Alastair wanted Cyrus to witness the true nature of his extended family firsthand, to confirm his own judgments, to understand the depths of their character, and to ensure that Novatech would ultimately be steered by a hand guided not just by ambition or intellect, but by an unwavering integrity. He wanted Cyrus to truly earn the mantle, to understand the profound responsibility of it, to see the world through the eyes of the dismissed. Upon Alastair's passing, Cyrus, now a discerning 70-year-old gentleman, felt the immense weight of his father's legacy and his unspoken, profound request. He had spent his life observing the world from a quiet distance, cultivating a keen, almost surgical sense of human nature, an ability to discern truth from facade. And what he saw in the incessant media coverage of the Thorne family's public mourning was a thinly veiled performance, a grotesque farce. The public grief was a hollow prelude, a thinly disguised opening act to the inevitable, ravenous scramble for the inheritance. Cyrus knew, with absolute certainty, that true character was never displayed in the harsh glare of the spotlight, but in the intimate, unobserved shadows, when one believed no one of consequence was watching, when the masks came off. Thus, the elaborate masquerade began. Cyrus, with the invaluable help of a trusted few who were privy to Alastair's final, intricate wishes, Alastair's longtime personal assistant, a retired security chief, and a discreet, highly ethical private investigator, meticulously crafted the persona of Silas, the humble janitor. He dyed his distinguished white hair a duller, unremarkable shade of gray, practiced a convincing slight stoop in his posture, and exchanged his bespoke, tailored suits for worn, shapeless overalls. He even adopted a new, slower cadence to his steps, a deliberate, almost imperceptible shuffle. His reasoning was simple yet profoundly insightful. No one truly saw a janitor. They dismissed him, talked over him, revealed their true, unvarnished selves because he was invisible, a non-entity, a mere part of the background hum of the corporate machine. From this position of profound anonymity, he could observe, listen, and assess the very individuals who believed themselves so inherently worthy of inheriting his father's vast empire. He wanted to see if anyone, possessed the kindness, the empathy, the genuine goodness that had been so conspicuously absent in the lives of the Thorne-Sterling siblings, a virtue his father had so desperately sought. There was another, far more personal, more poignant layer to Cyrus's deception. Decades ago, long before he fully understood his father's secretive ways, Cyrus himself had had a discreet, short-lived marriage, resulting in a son, Leo. For reasons deeply rooted in protecting Leo from the very world Cyrus now sought to understand and tame, he had kept this part of his life entirely separate, a closely guarded secret even from Leo himself. Leo had grown up unaware of his father's true identity, believing Cyrus to be a kind, if somewhat distant, old friend of his mother, a gentle presence in their lives. Now, by a twist of fate that Cyrus recognized as both cruel and profoundly fortunate, Leo worked as a data entry clerk at Novatech, a diligent, unassuming employee lost in the corporate labyrinth. Cyrus knew this, and it added a poignant, almost heartbreaking layer to his observations. He would see not only how his father's so-called heirs treated others, but how they treated his own unsuspecting son, the quiet, hard-working young man he had longed to know better. This was not just a test for the Thorne-Sterlings, it was a final, critical assessment of Novatech's very soul, and a quiet, deeply personal evaluation of the legacy he would ultimately bestow upon his true family, upon Leo. Silas, the janitor, moved through the gleaming, labyrinthine corridors of Novatech Industries like a phantom, a silent, almost spectral observer in a world obsessed with superficial appearances and hollow power. His mop and bucket were not merely tools, they were his perfect camouflage, his cleaning cart a mobile, unassuming command center from which he gathered invaluable intelligence. He saw everything, the hurried, conspiratorial whispers by the water cooler, the backhanded, thinly veiled compliments exchanged in the executive lounge, the dismissive, almost contemptuous gestures directed towards the service staff, the unspoken hierarchies, the subtle cruelties. And he saw, with a chilling, irrefutable clarity, the true, unvarnished colors of Blaine and Seraphina Thorne-Sterling. Their arrogance was not a subtle trait, it was a loud, obnoxious declaration, a constant, grating hum in the background of Novatech. Silas would often overhear their conversations, punctuated by their braying laughter that seemed to echo with disdain. Honestly, Blaine, Seraphina would drawl, her voice dripping with an almost theatrical contempt as she watched a junior employee scurry past, laden with files, the sheer mediocrity that fills this building. One wonders how Grandpa ever built an empire with such support staff. Blaine would nod, a gesture of profound agreement, adjusting the expensive cufflink on his wrist. Indeed, Sarah. It's almost a charity case. We'll need to do a serious cleanse once we're properly in charge. Silas, meticulously wiping a handprint off a glass wall nearby, would allow a flicker of grim, knowing satisfaction to cross his face. Their words were precisely what he had expected, a confirmation of his deepest fears, yet hearing them spoken with such casual, unthinking cruelty still grated on his ears, a discordant note in the corporate symphony. Their primary target for derision, as Silas quickly noted with a growing sense of paternal protectiveness, was Leo. Leo, the data entry clerk, was a quiet, almost unassuming young man, his head usually buried in the intricate patterns of spreadsheets, his fingers flying across the keyboard with tireless efficiency. He was unassuming in his demeanor, dressed in simple, clean, yet worn clothes, and possessed a work ethic that bordered on relentless, an almost forgotten virtue in the Thornsterling world. He was everything Blaine and Serafina were not: hard-working, humble, genuinely committed to his tasks, and utterly lacking in the superficial glitz they so valued. This, apparently, made him a prime, irresistible target for their malicious amusement. One Tuesday morning, Silas was meticulously polishing the chrome fixtures in the break room, the scent of industrial cleaner mingling with stale coffee. Blaine sauntered in, a half-eaten gourmet pastry clutched delicately in his hand, crumbs clinging to his designer shirt. He spotted Leo, who was quietly, painstakingly trying to fix a persistent paper jam in the temperamental office printer. "Still wrestling with that beast, Leo?" Blaine drawled, leaning insolently against the counter, an air of superior amusement about him. "You know, with all the money Novatech spends on its tech, you'd think we could afford someone who actually knows how to operate it." Leo mumbled a soft, almost inaudible apology, his face flushing a mortified crimson. Serafina joined them, taking a slow, deliberate sip from her designer coffee cup, her eyes glinting. "Oh, don't be too hard on him, Blaine. Some people are just technologically challenged. Perhaps a return to the abacus would suit him better." They chuckled, their laughter echoing unpleasantly, gratingly, in the small, confined room. Silas watched Leo's shoulders slump slightly, a quiet, almost heartbreaking resignation in his posture. The janitor felt a sharp pang, not of pity, but of a quiet, burning, paternal resolve. He knew Leo's quiet nature, his reluctance to cause a scene. He knew his son was not one to make a fuss, to stand up for himself in the face of such casual cruelty. The pranks, initially minor annoyances, escalated with a chilling predictability. First, trivial irritations. Leo's chair would be lowered to its absolute minimum setting, his meticulously organized desk supplies would be rearranged into chaotic disarray, or his reliable computer mouse would be replaced with a novelty, unusable one. Silas would often be the one to discreetly fix the chair or retrieve the correct mouse, sometimes catching Blaine or Serafina trying to stifle their malicious giggles from around a nearby corner. He saw the cold satisfaction in their eyes, the thrill of their petty, unchallenged power, a power wielded without consequence. Then came the more insidious attempts to deliberately undermine Leo's work, to jeopardize his very livelihood. One afternoon, Silas was emptying waste bins, the rustle of papers a familiar backdrop, when he saw Blaine surreptitiously swap Leo's labeled report folder with an empty one, just minutes before a critical deadline. Leo, frantic, searched his desk, his movements growing increasingly desperate, only for Blaine to discover the correct folder in a completely illogical, impossible place, feigning helpfulness while subtly, expertly implying Leo's profound disorganization. "Careful, Leo," Blaine had said, a fake, sickening sincerity in his tone. "Losing important documents might just lose you your job." Silas noted the distinct glint of pure malice in Blaine's eyes, even as he offered his assistance, a venomous politeness that spoke volumes. Amidst this escalating, increasingly brazen cruelty, Silas also observed another individual, a young woman named Kaylin Vance. Kaylin was a junior architect, brimming with bright, innovative ideas and a quiet, tenacious determination. She was also clearly struggling. Silas would often see her eating a simple, carefully packed lunch or staying late, meticulously poring over blueprints under the harsh fluorescent lights, sometimes stifling profound yawns that spoke of exhaustion. He knew from whispered conversations among the cleaning staff, the unofficial intelligence network of the building, that Kaylin was supporting her ailing mother, whose medical bills mounted daily, and working a second, part-time job to make ends meet, sacrificing her own comfort for her family. Her shoes were often scuffed, her clothes functional rather than fashionable, but her eyes held a spark of genuine kindness, a quiet dignity that shone brightly. Silas noticed Kaylin often casting worried, sympathetic glances towards Leo, her brow furrowed in silent concern. She never openly confronted Blaine or Serafina, perhaps out of a very real fear for her own precarious position, a fear Cyrus understood, but her acts of kindness were discreet, almost imperceptible to the casual, small beacons of light in the corporate darkness. She'd leave a fresh coffee by Leo's desk when she knew he was working late, a silent gesture of solidarity. She'd offer a quiet, encouraging word when he looked particularly downcast, her voice a gentle balm. Once, after Blaine had accidentally spilled a cup of water over Leo's keyboard, his snickers barely suppressed, Kalen had quickly rushed over with a spare, clean cloth and helped him dry it, skillfully distracting from Blaine's snickers with a cheerful, perfectly timed, "Oh dear, these office accidents happen, don't they? Good thing I always keep a spare." Her quick thinking, her unselfish action, was a quiet marvel to Silas. The culmination of Blaine and Serafina's maliciousness came during the annual Novatech Innovation Showcase, a prestigious, highly anticipated internal event where employees presented their new ideas and groundbreaking concepts to the senior management, a chance for recognition and advancement. Leo, surprisingly to many, had developed a small, but incredibly efficient, algorithm for streamlining data processing, a concept he was quietly, genuinely excited to present, a rare spark of pride in his unassuming life. Blaine and Serafina saw their opportunity, not just for a minor prank, but for a grand, public humiliation, a final, definitive crushing of Leo's spirit. Silas, strategically stationed near the main presentation hall, a dust cloth draped over his arm, witnessed the unfolding disaster with a chilling clarity. As Leo, nervous but determined, began his presentation, the projector screen suddenly flickered violently, then, to the horror of the audience, displayed not Leo's innovative algorithm, but a series of absurd, unflattering caricatures of Novatech executives, interspersed with what appeared to be Leo's highly personal, and incredibly embarrassing, diary entries, clearly fabricated, a cruel, intricate hoax. The room, initially stunned into silence, erupted in collective gasps, followed by an uncomfortable wave of snickers and stifled laughter. Leo froze, his face draining of all color, utterly mortified, his dreams crumbling before his eyes. Blaine and Serafina, seated in the front row, feigned shock with practiced ease, but their eyes, caught by Silas's unblinking gaze, glinted with undisguised malicious triumph. "Oh, Leo," Serafina stage whispered, her voice perfectly calibrated to carry to half the room, "is this really the innovation you were talking about? Quite the artistic talent, I see." Blaine pretended to stifle a laugh, a loud, theatrical cough. The humiliation was complete, brutal, and public. Leo stood there, frozen, paralyzed by the sudden, crushing weight of the room's amusement, the sting of betrayal. It was a career-ending move, designed not just to embarrass him beyond repair, but to sabotage his reputation entirely, to ensure he would never rise within Novatech. Just as Leo, his eyes wide with despair, was about to flee the stage, to escape the suffocating gaze of judgment, a voice, clear, strong, and imbued with an unexpected courage, cut through the snickers and whispers. "Excuse me." It was Kalen Vance. She stepped forward, not onto the stage, but to the very front of the audience, her face etched with genuine concern, her eyes fixed on Leo. "I believe there's been a technical glitch," she said, her voice betraying no fear, only calm logic. "My team had a similar issue last week. It looked like a virus, affecting random files. If Leo allows me, I can help him quickly troubleshoot and get his actual presentation back up." She offered Leo a small, deeply reassuring smile, a silent plea for him to let her help, an unspoken promise of support. Her intervention was not an aggressive confrontation, not a defiant challenge, but a calm, logical, compassionate offer of assistance, implicitly challenging the insidious notion that Leo was responsible for the sabotage. Leo, still reeling from the shock and public mortification, could only nod mutely, a raw, unspoken gratitude in his eyes. Kalen quickly moved to the laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. She wasn't just fixing a glitch, she was subtly, expertly overriding the malicious program, doing her absolute best to salvage Leo's dignity, to restore a shred of his reputation. She whispered a few encouraging words to him, her presence a silent, unwavering shield against the hostile, judgmental atmosphere. Silas, observing from the shadows, felt a quiet surge of profound admiration. Kaylin, despite her own struggles, despite the very real risk to her own precarious standing, had stepped forward not with a grand, dramatic gesture, but with genuine, compassionate, human help. The glitch was quickly bypassed. Leo's actual, albeit now rushed, presentation eventually played on the screen. But the damage, to Leo, was done, and to Blaine and Seraphina's reputation, unknowingly, in Cyrus's eyes, it was sealed. The contrast could not have been starker, more profound. The Thorne-Sterlings, reveling in another's pain, their faces alight with cruel amusement, and Kaylin Vance, risking her own comfort, her own future, to offer a lifeline of pure, unadulterated kindness. It was everything Cyrus had needed to see. The test was complete. The final judgment had been made. The day of the official reading had arrived, cloaked in a faux solemnity that barely masked the volatile, underlying tension simmering beneath the surface. The Novatech boardroom, usually a scene of strategic meetings and high-stakes negotiations, was transformed into a somber theater of palpable anticipation, a stage set for the final act. Blaine and Seraphina Thorne-Sterling arrived, radiating a triumphant, almost arrogant air, their expensive clothing serving as a uniform for their presumed, inherited status. They exchanged knowing glances, a silent agreement that their moment, their long-awaited coronation, had finally, irrevocably come. The lawyer, Mr. Alastair Finch, sat impassively at the head of the table, his expression unreadable, surrounded by various company executives and a handful of distant relatives, all eager, nervous, to hear their fate, their slice of the Novatech pie. Leo was also present, looking visibly nervous and utterly out of place, clutching a file tightly to his chest as if for comfort. He had been specifically requested by the lawyer to attend, though he had no idea why, his presence a mystery even to himself. Kaylin Vance, too, was there, having been invited in her capacity as a promising junior architect, a surprising honor. She sat quietly, observing the scene with a mix of curiosity and a slight, understandable discomfort, her kind eyes taking in the room's palpable tension. As for Silas, the janitor, he was predictably, almost reassuringly, there, armed with his trusty dustpan and brush, seemingly engaged in a final, meticulous sweep of the highly polished floor, a silent testament to his perceived role. He moved with the quiet efficiency of someone utterly accustomed to being ignored, to being unseen, yet his eyes, sharp and alert, surveyed the room, taking in every subtle shift in expression, every nervous cough, every furtive glance. Blaine and Seraphina barely registered his presence, their gazes fixed intently on Mr. Finch and the thick, ominous legal document that lay before him, the key to their future. Mr. Finch cleared his throat, the sound, though soft, seemed amplified, resonating in the hushed, expectant room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice imbued with a carefully measured gravitas, "we are gathered here today for the formal reading of the last will and testament of Alastair Thorne, founder of Novatech Industries." He proceeded to outline various minor bequests to charities, to long-time, loyal employees, and to obscure distant relatives, which Blaine and Seraphina received with barely concealed, bored impatience, their attention fixed on the main event. "And now," Mr. Finch continued, pausing for a dramatic, calculated effect, his gaze sweeping over the eager faces, "we come to the core of Mr. Thorne's legacy. His wishes regarding the future of Novatech Industries, and the bulk of his considerable personal estate." Blaine and Seraphina visibly stiffened, their smiles widening, ready, expectant, for their names to be called, for the confirmation of their destiny. Just as Mr. Finch was about to utter the crucial, life-altering words, the heavy, ornate oak doors to the boardroom swung open with a resounding, echoing thud. All heads snapped towards the entrance, a collective gasp rippling through the room. Standing framed in the doorway was a figure who commanded instant, absolute attention. Gone were the faded overalls and the feigned, habitual stooped posture. In their place stood a man in a perfectly tailored, dark suit, a garment that exuded quiet power and impeccable taste, his previously dull white hair immaculately styled, his eyes piercingly, powerfully intelligent. He exuded an aura of quiet power, an undeniable authority that settled upon the room like a tangible weight. Behind him stood two burly security guards, their presence a silent, forceful statement, and a younger, impeccably dressed lawyer, carrying a briefcase filled with documents. A collective, stunned gasp swept through the room, followed by a sudden, heavy silence. Blaine and Seraphina's triumphant, expectant smiles faltered, then dissolved completely into looks of utter, profound bewilderment, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning dread. The janitor? Seraphina whispered, her voice barely audible, a strangled sound of disbelief. Blaine's jaw dropped, his face paling to an alarming white as he recognized the features of the man they had mocked, belittled, and dismissed for months, the man whose very existence they had deemed inconsequential. The man in the suit strode purposefully into the room, his gaze, now sharp and penetrating, sweeping over the astonished, disbelieving faces. He stopped directly opposite Blaine and Seraphina, his eyes, so recently filled with a feigned mildness, now burning with an intense, knowing fire, a silent testament to his true identity. "Good morning, everyone," Cyrus Blackwood said, his voice clear, resonant, and completely devoid of the rasping, humble quality they associated with Silas. Or perhaps, for some of you, a rather shocking morning. Mr. Finch, who had respectfully risen at Cyrus's entrance, offered a slight, deferential bow of his head. "Mr. Blackwood," he acknowledged, his voice confirming the man's identity, his words ringing with undeniable authority. Blaine finally found his voice, a strangled squeak of sheer disbelief, laced with a desperate hope this was all a terrible joke. "Blackwood? Who are you? What is the meaning of this? Where is Silas?" Cyrus allowed a sardonic, almost cruel, smile to play on his lips. "Silas, Mr. Thornsterling," he replied, his voice laced with an almost glacial amusement, "was merely a costume. A disguise. My name, as Mr. Finch has just stated, is Cyrus Blackwood. And I am Alastair Thorne's long-lost, secret son. And, as it happens," he added, his gaze flicking to the lawyer, a subtle signal, his designated, primary heir. The statement landed like a thunderbolt, shattering the fragile remnants of the Thornsterlings' world. The room erupted in gasps, frantic whispers, and stunned, disbelieving silence. Blaine and Seraphina looked as if they had been struck by lightning. Their faces, moments ago alight with avarice and smug triumph, were now contorted in a grotesque mask of shock, profound disbelief, and a dawning, horrifying realization. They glanced frantically from Cyrus to Mr. Finch, then back again, searching desperately for any sign, any flicker of an indication, that this was a cruel, elaborate joke, a nightmare from which they would soon awaken. "This is impossible," Seraphina shrieked, finally recovering her voice, albeit a shrill, hysterical version of it. "You're a janitor. An old man who cleans toilets. My grandfather would never." Cyrus cut her off, his voice now colder, sharper, cutting through her hysteria like a razor. "Your grandfather, Miss Thornsterling, was a man of profound wisdom and foresight. He knew that the future of Novatech required more than just a bloodline, more than a pretty name. It required character, integrity, and a genuine respect for those who built this company, for those who truly understood its value. Qualities, I regret to say, that I found sorely lacking in certain individuals." His gaze rested pointedly, devastatingly, on Blaine and Seraphina, who visibly flinched, their faces paling further. Then, Cyrus turned his gaze to Leo, who sat frozen in his seat, his eyes wide with incomprehension, the sheer magnitude of the moment almost too much to bear. A softer, almost tender expression, a rare glimpse of his true heart, crossed Cyrus's face. "And to one more person, who, unknowingly, has been a central part of my observations." He paused, his eyes meeting Leo's, a silent communication passing between them. "Leo, my son," he said, the words hanging heavy, momentous in the air, echoing with a lifetime of unspoken truths. "It's time you knew the truth." Leo gasped, his hand flying to his mouth, a choked sob escaping his lips, the file he was holding clattering unnoticed to the polished floor. The revelation of his father's identity, coupled with the overwhelming magnitude of the moment, was almost too much for his mind to process, a sudden, beautiful, terrifying explosion of truth. Cyrus turned back to the room, his expression now resolute, unwavering. I have spent the past several months among you, observing. Not from the executive suites, not from behind closed doors, but from the ground up, from the very foundations of this company. I have seen the true measure of your characters, your compassion, or your utter lack thereof. And based on those observations, my father's true legacy, and the future of Novatech, will be decided. His eyes, full of a powerful, unwavering conviction, met the terrified, desperate gazes of Blaine and Serafina, whose masks of entitlement had finally, irrevocably fallen, revealing the raw, ugly fear, the desolate despair beneath. The game was truly, irrevocably, over. The immediate aftermath of Cyrus Blackwood's revelation was a maelstrom of shock, furious denial, and a terrifying, dawning realization for Blaine and Serafina Thorne-Sterling. Their faces, once portraits of smug self-assurance, were now pale and grotesquely contorted, their eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and a genuine, profound terror. The room buzzed with incredulous whispers, a confused cacophony, as the assembled executives and relatives struggled to comprehend the seismic, devastating shift in power, the complete overturning of their world. This is a lie. Blaine shrieked, springing to his feet, his chair scraping loudly, violently across the polished floor, the sound harsh and discordant. A grotesque joke. My grandfather would never hide a son, let alone make him the heir. You're an impostor. A charlatan. Cyrus merely raised an eyebrow, a picture of calm, unassailable authority, his demeanor a stark contrast to Blaine's frantic hysteria. Mr. Finch, if you would be so kind as to proceed with the will's crucial clauses. I believe the DNA evidence, confirmed by independent labs beyond reproach, and the various signed, legally binding documents Alastair prepared over the decades, will quickly dispel any doubts regarding my identity, Mr. Thorne-Sterling. Mr. Finch, with a solemn nod, began to read, his voice cutting through the rising tension, each word a cold, hard fact. He detailed Alastair Thorne's explicit, unalterable instructions, meticulously outlining Cyrus Blackwood as the sole beneficiary of his controlling shares in Novatech Industries, the entirety of his vast personal fortune, and, crucially, the newly appointed chairman of the board. The Thorne-Sterling siblings, alongside other relatives, were allocated only minor, symbolic bequests, a modest trust fund for a distant cousin, a small endowment for a long-serving gardener, a mere pittance compared to the sprawling empire they had expected, had been promised to themselves. This is outrageous. Serafina cried, tears of raw, impotent rage springing to her eyes, tracing paths through her carefully applied makeup. We are his blood. We are the rightful heirs. He loved us. He cherished us. Her voice rose to a desperate, pitiful wail. Cyrus stepped forward, his voice cold, unwavering, utterly without pity. Love, Miss Thorne-Sterling, is not measured by the size of one's inheritance, nor by public pronouncements. And rightful heirs are not chosen merely by bloodline, but by character, by the content of one's heart. I have observed your character, both of you, for months. I have witnessed your callous disregard for others, your petty cruelty, your utter, profound lack of empathy, your complete inability to see beyond yourselves. His voice gained momentum, each word a hammer blow, striking them where it hurt most. I saw how you reveled in the humiliation of hard-working employees. I saw how you treated those you deemed below you as disposable, as mere playthings for your cruel, self-serving games. He recounted specific incidents, the words painting vivid, damning pictures, the deliberately spilled coffee that ruined reports, the maliciously swapped files that jeopardized careers, the public, orchestrated sabotage of Leo's presentation, moments they had considered harmless amusement. Blaine and Serafina squirmed, their faces flushing in a mixture of shame and fury, knowing that the janitor had seen it all, every single moment of their vile behavior. The very actions they thought were harmless fun, or at worst, minor, forgettable annoyances, were now being laid bare as irrefutable evidence of their profound unworthiness, their fundamental unsuitability. As for your positions within Novatech, Cyrus continued, his voice echoing with absolute finality, leaving no room for argument or appeal, effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Your company credit cards have been frozen, and company-owned properties you currently occupy will be vacated within 48 hours. Any further attempts to interfere with Novatech operations, any hint of legal challenge, will be met with full, unyielding legal action. Consider yourself severed from this company, permanently. The Thornsterlings stood stunned, their world crumbling around them with a speed that defied comprehension. Their faces contorted into masks of disbelief and raw, agonizing despair. The lavish life they had taken for granted, the immense power they had presumed was inherently theirs, vanished in an instant, a wisp of smoke. They were not only disinherited, they were publicly humiliated, stripped of every privilege, every comfort they had ever known. The irony was devastating, a bitter poison. They had been undone by the very man they had mocked, belittled, and dismissed as the janitor. Then, Cyrus turned his gaze to Leo. Leo, who had remained frozen, processing the astonishing, life-altering revelation of his father's true identity, now looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of shock, profound confusion, and a nascent, cautious hope. Cyrus walked over to him, a gentle, tender smile replacing his earlier sternness, a warmth radiating from him. "Leo," Cyrus said softly, placing a comforting hand on his son's shoulder, a gesture of deep connection. "I know this is a great deal to take in, a whirlwind of new information. For reasons I will explain in time, reasons rooted in protection, I kept my two lives separate. But know this, I have watched you, observed your quiet diligence, your unwavering resilience in the face of unkindness, your inherent goodness. You have a good heart, my son, a true heart, and a spirit worthy of far more than you have known. And now, your life, and mine, will change profoundly, together." He offered Leo a future not just as his son, but as a key figure in the rebuilt Novatech, a future founded on integrity, genuine contribution, and shared purpose. Leo, overwhelmed by the sudden, overwhelming cascade of emotion, could only nod, tears silently tracing paths down his cheeks, a mix of sorrow for lost time and exhilarating hope for the future. Finally, Cyrus turned to Kaylin Vance, who sat wide-eyed, her own struggles momentarily forgotten in the unfolding, dramatic spectacle. "And you, Miss Vance," Cyrus said, his voice imbued with genuine warmth, a quiet respect. "Your compassion, your unwavering willingness to help another when it carried significant personal risk, when it could have jeopardized your own precarious position, did not go unnoticed. You embody the spirit of innovation and integrity that my father truly valued, and that Novatech desperately needs for its future." Kaylin's breath hitched in her throat. She had simply acted on instinct, out of basic human decency, a fundamental belief in right over wrong. She had expected no reward, only perhaps a quiet commendation, a fleeting acknowledgement. "Therefore," Cyrus announced, his voice carrying through the now silent, captivated room, "I am establishing a new, paramount division within Novatech, focused entirely on ethical innovation and employee well-being, a division that will define our future. I want you to head it, Miss Vance, with full autonomy, complete support, and all the resources you require to bring your vision to life. Furthermore, as a token of genuine appreciation for your character, for the selfless kindness you showed, you will find a substantial trust fund established in your name, sufficient to alleviate all your current burdens, and a fully paid-off home of your choosing, a place of peace and security. It is a testament to the fact that true wealth lies not in what you inherit, but in how you treat others, in the kindness you extend to your fellow human beings." Kaylin gasped, tears silently welling in her eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming disbelief, profound gratitude, and a soaring, impossible hope. The crushing weight of years of struggle, of working 2 jobs, of the constant worry of caring for her ailing mother, lifted in an instant, a heavy burden finally removed. She looked from Cyrus, the humble janitor-turned-billionaire heir, to Leo, his newfound son, his face alight with wonder, and finally to Blaine and Serafina, who now stood utterly defeated, their faces stripped bare of all pretense. The contrast was stark, undeniable, and the justice, to all who witnessed it, was exquisitely poetic. A year later, Novatech Industries flourished under a new, profoundly ethical, and human-centered direction. Cyrus Blackwood, now openly and confidently at the helm, had initiated sweeping, transformative changes, prioritizing employee welfare, genuine, meaningful innovation, and a pervasive culture of respect over pure, unbridled profit margins. The corporate landscape, once a cutthroat arena of ruthless competition, began to transform into a more collaborative, human-centered environment, a place where people felt valued, not just exploited. Leo, after overcoming the initial profound shock of his father's revelation, embraced his new, challenging role within Novatech with a quiet determination. He worked closely alongside Cyrus, applying his diligent nature not just to data, but to strategic planning, to employee engagement initiatives, to fostering the very culture his father envisioned. He learned the ropes of leadership, guided by his father's wisdom and his own innate sense of fairness and integrity. Their relationship, once distant and shrouded in secrecy, blossomed into a profound, unbreakable bond of mutual respect, deep affection, and shared purpose. Kaylin Vance, now the esteemed director of the Ethical Innovation Division, had soared beyond all expectations. Her division became a beacon of responsible technology, developing groundbreaking solutions that genuinely improved lives, that addressed real human needs, not just boosted bottom lines or corporate prestige. Her mother, now recovering and thriving in a beautiful, fully paid-for home, free from the crushing weight of medical bills, was a living testament to the life-changing impact of Kaylin's unwavering kindness and selfless actions. Kaylin, no longer burdened by crippling financial stress, radiated a quiet confidence, her natural compassion now amplified by the powerful platform she had been given, her vision brought to life. She was living proof that integrity, even in the darkest, most challenging of times, truly finds its rightful, extraordinary reward. As for Blaine and Serafina Thorne-Sterling, their fall from grace was as spectacular and complete as their prior arrogance had been breathtaking. Stripped of their inherited wealth, their carefully cultivated connections, and their very identities, they found themselves utterly adrift in a world they had always scorned, a world that now demanded accountability. Their luxurious apartments were repossessed, their designer cars impounded, their privileged bubble burst. They were forced to take on menial jobs, struggling desperately to make ends meet, their entitled attitudes clashing violently with the harsh, unforgiving realities of working for a living, a concept utterly foreign to them. Blaine attempted to leverage his connections, only to find every door slammed in his face, his reputation as a spoiled, vindictive individual preceding him like a dark cloud. Serafina, who had never lifted a finger in her life, found herself working in a low-paying retail job, constantly complaining to anyone who would listen about the unbearable customers and her peasant colleagues, forever trapped in a cycle of bitterness and resentment. The world, which had once bowed to their every whim, now demanded accountability, a concept utterly foreign to their entitled minds. They were left with nothing but their bitter regrets and the crushing, inescapable knowledge that the janitor had been watching, judging, and ultimately, delivering a cold, unyielding justice. Cyrus Blackwood, observing the profound transformation of Novatech and the dramatically altered lives of those he had impacted, felt a deep, abiding sense of peace, a quiet satisfaction. He had fulfilled his father's true legacy, not just by preserving his vast empire, but by ensuring it fell into the hands of those who truly deserved it, those who would honor its spirit. He had proved that power, when wielded with wisdom, integrity, and a profound sense of purpose, could reshape destinies, could mend what was broken. He had seen firsthand that true character is not revealed in times of prosperity or public acclaim, when the cameras are rolling and the praise is flowing, but in the quiet, unobserved moments, when one believes their actions carry no consequence, when no one of importance is watching. It is in the shadows, when the spotlight is off, when the masks are down, that the true nature of a person shines through, for better or for worse. And ultimately, genuine kindness, an unyielding spirit of empathy, and an honest, compassionate heart will always find their rightful, and often extraordinary, reward, a testament to the enduring power of true human spirit. If you were as captivated by Cyrus's cunning plan and the shocking twist of fate as we were, make sure to like this video. We have many more stories of hidden identities, surprising revelations, and poetic justice waiting for you. Subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next gripping tale. And now, we want to hear from you. What was the most shocking moment for you in this story? Were you surprised by Cyrus's true identity, or did you have a feeling Silas was more than he seemed? If you were in Cyrus's shoes, would you have chosen the same path to test your family? Share your thoughts and predictions in the comments below. We love reading your insights.